Good day, fellow deal makers. Welcome to the Deal Scout. This show is all about deals and deal makers and people that are dedicated to helping deal makers do better deals. You're going to hear deals a lot in this conversation. So I'm going to shut up and bring on our guest, Joe, who's going to talk to us about transitions, talk to us about merchandising yourself, talk to us about selling yourself to the next deal. Joe, welcome to the show.
Josh, it's a pleasure to be here. Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, where's home for you?
We're currently located in the greater Houston area in Texas.
Ah, the great country of Texas. My son was born in Dallas. Beautiful place. How long have you been in Texas for?
I was born and bred in Texas down near the Mexican border in the Rio Grande Valley. So then spent 34 years in the military and got back here as fast as I could.
Got it. All right. So before we go into deals and such like that, man, I got to say thank you for your service in the Army. My dad was Army as well, but just thank you for your service. What did you do in the Army?
Well, in the Army, I was a warfighter for 14 years, mechanized infantry, airborne infantry, air assault infantry, and special operations. And so I reached a point about after 14 years where they weren't let you weren't going to be out in the field doing this stuff. So I branch transferred into logistics, and because I'd made a name for myself for solving problems and saving money, and so spent the rest of the year as a heavy logistician in the Army.
Okay, got it. So you got out of the Army. How old were you when 34 years in the military? That's a long time. You get out of the military. About how old were you?
I was 52 years when I retired with 30 years of active duty.
Got it. Now, I've seen a lot of people, working on transition. And I heard it's one of the biggest, one of the big challenge points that people have is transitioning from military life, 34 years into civilian life, right? Because there's a lot of things that maybe just doesn't transfer, like, how to take down that target, right? Like how to put a hole in that thing. How did you transition and what did you transition to?
So, initially when I first got out, I tried to transition into the corporate world. And, the corporate world, for the most part, doesn't need a 52-year-old, executive. And where I interviewed a lot of places, I think I really threatened the people. And because I had finally had one guy told me, he says, Joe, I mean, you're ideal for this job, but we're not going to hire you. And I said, well, help me here because, I just want to figure this out. And he says, you've handled more money than the CEO, you've handled more people than the CEO, and you've handled bigger programs than the CEO, and you could take my job tomorrow.
Yeah.
So, but he gave me some really good advice, and he says, go find, some people's putting a deal together, and where you could share your multifunctional, multifaceted, experience set, with sweat equity, that kind of stuff. And that was sound advice. And that's what I ended up doing. Worked on various cooperative joint ventures, in China for 2 or 3 years and power plants, chemical plants, just trying to put different deals together as well as do, consulting when the opportunities came.
Yeah. Super cool. All right. So, Fort Bragg, North Carolina, Airborne Corps. My dad used to, he was Screaming Eagles and he packed chutes. I forget which one.
He's a
It was
rigger.
yeah. Well, he jumped for a while and then he went, he did some packed shoots after he caught a
Yeah.
few bullets and a bayonet over in someone else's backyard. But yeah, man, it's so cool. So you guys, he's older than you and he's passed away now, but you guys may have crossed paths
Yeah.
in the Groningen. So all right, so you're going for these job interviews. You're 52 years old. You're retired from the military, and that's really young to retire. You started really young in the Army, and you were not finding traction, right?
Right. And, you know, what I learned from that was before LinkedIn was here,
Yeah.
and so the way that you did this is you went to the newspaper.
Well, what's a newspaper? Holy moly! I get it. You would go to the newspaper and make a phone call, but what was
Yeah.
that like for you? What was going through your head? as you're going through these
Uh,
transitions?
it was the darkest days of my life because you're out there, you're in this experience set, because you were in the womb of the army, right? And now you've been born into this thing called the civilian world, and you're a baby, and you really have to learn how to crawl, walk, and run in it, and with without LinkedIn, you tried to talk to recruiters, you read the newspaper, who's hiring, you went to, all the different things that was out there around 2003, 2004, and today the newspaper almost doesn't, exist. And certainly there's no job classified ads in there where they've got the jobs listed.
Yeah.
And you just tried to get somebody to hear your story. You carried your resume. And what LinkedIn has done for you in that way is it allows you a structure to articulate what you bring to the table.
Hmm.
And in that way, you can get somebody to help you translate the military vernacular to the hiring manager vernacular.
Yeah.
And so it took me a while to, and you just learned it by experientially, which means, hey, fail faster, learn something, adjust.
Yeah. Yeah. So here comes LinkedIn, and you're doing consulting work, and you're helping put deals together, and here comes LinkedIn, and you said you had a background in some executive recruiting. So how did these things start to form together? You couldn't necessarily get a
Oh,
normal corporate
what?
job, and you started doing these things.
Right. So what happened is I was working on this cooperative joint venture in China to bring wastewater infrastructure over there. The, how do I find people that were in the U.S. that had experience working on a project in China? And so the first thing, the team did is classical old methodology. You go get a retained executive recruiter. Here's all the things that we need, all that kind of stuff. And it wasn't going anywhere. And then at the end of 6 months, they kept some of our money and said we gave it a best effort, and we haven't found anybody. And I said, hey, this is a waste.
Yeah.
Um, but I could understand. So what happened with LinkedIn is I started learning how to use it. And the way LinkedIn was back then was kind of like the Model T, and what I was able to do, I said, okay, I can find people out here that worked in China, or I find one person that worked in China, right? And then you call them, get them on the phone and say, well, yeah, talk to Billy Bob and Billy Ray, and that kind of stuff. So I said, wow, this is a powerful tool to use. And so I began to use the tool effectively for what we were trying to do in China, and just learned it inside and out, and basically have used it extensively over the 18 years. Then later on in my career, I was a executive recruiter with a top 2%, firm, and we used it extensively. Now, the firm had a huge database of resumes, but on a LinkedIn profile, you find somebody that's, it's their job to keep it current, right?
Yeah.
So if a person's not keeping it current, hey, okay, no problem. But you can really find the people you need out there today, and I think pretty much everybody's figured out that this is a tool um, that you may not like it, but you need to master it enough to take care of yourself.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. So here we are. How old are you now, Joe?
Gosh, I'm 70.
Awesome, man. I love that you're still like in the game and you're still doing deals and you're a deal maker, right? You cannot stop.
No, I mean, you know, what I have done over the in 2017, Harvey flooded our office. So I looked at my partner and said, "Hey, you want to, we want to re-outfit an office? You want to do?" He said, "No, I think I'm going to the house and I'm going to work this side of things. And I said, well, I'm going to the house and I'm going to figure out how to work my side of the stuff. And so it took about 6 months for that transition, to get your whole organized so you can work and, put the infrastructure in, and then design your business so that you could work, from, a home office. And I always thought, woe is me. If Harvey hadn't hit us, we'd have an office. And then COVID comes and said, oh my gosh, the good Lord took care of me. He forced me
Yeah.
to um, redesign my business so that I could operate it this way. And in doing so, um, it's a lot of fun, and I'm at that stage where, hey, if it's work, I don't want to do it. If I enjoy doing it and enjoy helping other people help themselves, it's rewarding.
Yeah. Now, what I found, and I'd love your thoughts on this, like you now help people articulate their value proposition and merchant themselves, right? Like
Yeah.
them themselves are deals that you have to sell to do further deals, right? Like the deal makers on to the next deal, and you help deal makers like position themselves correctly. Like what are some of the things that you have found over the 18 years of being on LinkedIn or whatever? Like what are some of the things you find that people are just doing it massively wrong?
Well, I have this, I in the 689 people I coached, the first 300 people said, Joe, hey, you need to have a pamphlet. You need to have a book. There ought to be an ebook. Where's the PDF on this stuff?
Yeah.
And so it took me a while, but Lori Ruff, she's my co-author. She and I wrote a book that's 1 hour long, and that's the hardest thing I've ever done is write a 1 hour book. And it's called LinkedIn: The 5 Minute Drill for Executive Networking Success. And it's not a complicated book because it's being used in high schools.
Yeah.
And people will say, well, this is for an executive. And I said, well, it's really for anybody, but an executive won't pick it up unless it says it's for an executive.
Yeah.
So uh, I couldn't believe the publisher said, hey, Joe, we got to pay this company to certify how long it takes to read this. And it's certified 69-minute read for a sophomore in high school.
Super cool. Now, this comes from a guy who you've seen combat and you've seen some stuff. You just said the hardest thing I've ever done was wrote a book, a 1 hour book. How,
Yeah.
explain that.
Well, it's easy to write a long book. I mean, it's just a stream of your consciousness, right?
Yeah.
I think, but there's 173 pages on the cutting room floor, for this book to be 1 hour long. And then
Yeah.
secondly, executives don't have a lot of time,
Yeah.
right? And so the idea was you could pick this book up on a 1 hour plane flight and you could be done with it.
Hmm.
And there's a lot of resources in the back of it. If you want to know more, it tells you where to go. And I look at the whole LinkedIn stratosphere as LinkedIn 101, 201, 301, 401, 501, 601. There's PhD level LinkedIn.
Really?
Okay.
Okay.
But most people just need the cusp of 301 to get what they want. And so this book was designed to take you from 101 to get you to 301 so that you could um, think about and frame your mind about what to get what you want. And people say, well, Joe, I mean, that sounds complicated. And I said, well, have you ever been fishing? And he said, yeah, my dad took me fishing. And I said, do you like filet mignon? Oh, yeah, I love a good steak. And I said, but do you take filet mignon and use it as bait? And they said, no, man, we use the bait that the fish likes. I said, so, if you want to catch a trout, you use a lure or bait that a trout likes, right? But what people do on LinkedIn is they use filet mignon to catch fish.
Hmm.
So, in other words, what is it that you want to achieve? Who do you want to find you? And have you given them the right bait?
Hmm. So it's right. So I totally get the idea of I'm a hunter, right? Like a deal guy is a hunter, right? So that image makes perfect sense to me. And I'm going on the hunt and it's like, what kind of deal do I want? What kind of person do I want to
Yeah.
connect with? Then you got to go, what's the right bait, right? And like what do you mean by that? Like give me examples of good versus bad.
Okay. Well, um, for example, I have another example that I use called the sword, saber, and scalpel.
Hmm.
So when you first get on LinkedIn, you're kind of using it like a big sword. It's a two-handed instrument. It's kind of like swinging a sledgehammer, right? It's not deft, and it takes all your strength to move it around. So as you learn more about LinkedIn, then you can kind of use it like a saber, and so you can kind of poke and light and slash and whatever. But then as you learn more about LinkedIn, you can use it like a scalpel. But what you have out there is people using swords to do heart surgery.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so, for example, I'll give you an example. I'm working with a client right now. He knows exactly what he wants. And there's three jobs in this Metroplex by three different companies. He knows the line number of the job, he knows the title. And what I've showed him is how to find out who's going to be the supervisors of those jobs in those companies. You know, it's I mean, LinkedIn is a business intelligence tool. And so we've kind of mapped out who those supervisors are. And so his mission over the next 18 months is to virtually connect and meet those people. And then after he virtually connects and meet those people, is go have coffee with those people. And so at the end of the day, in 18 months, one of those three jobs is going to be open. And his mission is to be known by everybody that's going to have some say so on that job because people will hire known entities over unknown entities.
Mm-hmm. Hmm.
So
Yeah.
that's a job of using LinkedIn like a scalpel.
Yeah. And it's strategic too. It's not just and you see these bots and you see these messages read out, hello. And it actually says like, hello, first name. And I'm like, God, someone just either paid someone in the Philippines or they just had an automated tool reach out to me. And I ignore 90% of my messages, 99 probably. Because I mean, you have a great size following. You get to the point where you have all these people and then you could just tell the difference between real and not real. Do you feel that?
Yeah. So, like, for example, when I send out a connection request with people, what I try to do is follow up with a very brief phone call, just an introductory discovery phone call. And I found that extremely, beneficial. A lot of people, don't want to take the call, and that's okay. At least I try to offer it up. And I always learn something about that person. And then if somebody calls and says, "Hey, Joe, do you know this Josh guy, that does podcasts?" He says, "Yeah, I do." And I talked to him the other day. It's really interesting. His dad was a parachute rigger.
Yeah.
Okay. But, I wouldn't know that unless I had some interaction with you.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk about LinkedIn as a business intelligence tool for people in transition, right? So
Mhm.
guy or gals getting out of the military and they're trying to get into civilian life, right? Or someone needs a job. And we talk about those kind of transitions. But for the deal makers, the transition is a deal by deal basis. So the commercial, broker needs to get the next building on lease up or needs to, get the next listing or the next investment, group. Like, what about for deal makers? What are some things that you've seen work really well for deal guys?
So you have to know what you want to know, right?
Mm-hmm.
And based on that, uh, in my view, what you try to do is connect with people that are going to be in your circle of influence, right? Or might have some interest in that. And, most deal makers are smart enough that on the first pass, you're not going to say, "Hey, I'm Joe and I need you to work on this deal with me. You just want to establish a connection, work up the touch points and all that kind of stuff. And, by the third touch point, you might say, well, this guy is not a fit for this. And hey, that's okay too. And that means you focus on the other things that, or the other people or other opportunities that you're going to work on.
Hmm. Got it. When coming to deal makers and we know as deal makers that it is a numbers game, but you can take the approach of like this shotgun approach and you can send out 10,000 messages and blast people, or you could be more of like the saber, the pokes, or you could be like a scalpel and be very strategic and specific. Which do you think works the best for
I don't,
investors or
okay, there's more than one school of thought
okay.
on this, so there is an efficacy for the shotgun approach. That's not mine. Mine's a one-on-one
Yeah.
thing because most of the people I'm working with, are individuals, right?
Hmm.
And so, like, if I'm going to send out a LinkedIn invitation to you, I would have looked at your LinkedIn profile, say, okay, this is a guy that, I'd like to be connected with. Hey, Josh, here's two or three things that we have in common. Please connect if you so desire, you know. And so right away, they're going to learn that some machine didn't put this together and that some human being actually looked at their profile,
Yeah.
you know. And so most people will give you the benefit of the doubt if you have a good profile. Somebody's going to come back and say, well, do I want to be connected to this guy? And so that's where you have to have a good profile, because if I go and say, look, I had the most wonderful podcast in the world and you need to talk to this Josh guy. Well, the first thing they're going to do, they're going to go to your LinkedIn profile. And even if they Google you, the number one hit is going to be your LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
And that is a drug deal between LinkedIn and the major search engines.
What do you mean by that?
So,
Explain.
in other words, most people, if you go to Google, type in their name, the first hit is if they have a LinkedIn profile, then the first comeback is going to be the LinkedIn profile.
Yeah.
Then it'll be your website or anything else that gets, hyper traffic, right? So what that does is the LinkedIn profile takes you to the top of the Google thing, and so that that didn't occur without some sort of arrangement with the search engine.
Yeah. And that's so true. When someone calls me, texts me, when I see a message, the first thing I do, because I've I have a pretty good community, and I found that I need to also protect my community
Absolutely.
because people want to, when you have a podcast show or when you have an audience, people want to get on. So the first thing I'll do is I'll do a Google search. I'm looking at their LinkedIn. First thing
Right.
I do, I don't carry a business card anymore. People are like, hey, let's connect. You have a business card? I go, let's connect on LinkedIn. Send me your phone number and we'll connect that way. And then I do that basic search. If I find things about like fraud or SEC stuff, I'm like, dude, stay away, right? So it's so true, and that LinkedIn is not just a social media platform for us to show like what kind of new fancy car we got. It's a business network, business intelligence tool. It's very powerful.
It
Um,
it is, and if because I talked to a lot of Vietnam veterans, and that that era, a lot of them not interested in transparency, don't want to be on the grid. I said, hey, no problem, but if you're going to do in business in today's world, then there's transparency is kind of required.
totally.
And so I didn't even have a website until the publisher forced me as a condition of publishing to have a
Really?
website. So all my business came directly from my LinkedIn profile.
No kidding. So someone comes to you, deal maker, and they go, Joe, listen, we know we need to be on LinkedIn. I've been ignoring this thing. I set it up 4 years ago, haven't updated it or whatever. Where do you even start? Right. So you help people do it. Like,
Yeah.
where do you
So
even start?
so I start with them. First thing I have when I work with somebody is I end up turning their head inside out.
I like it.
Okay, because you got to see the world in a different way. And I know when that happens. And so then once you see the world in a different way, you kind of see what you see where you are in the valley, right? Because I could be on one terrain feature looking at this town, and you could be on the other, and we're both looking at the town, but we have a completely different view.
Mm-hmm.
So the key then is once you can kind of see where you need to go, okay, open your eyes and see differently. Then we talk about what is it that you need to do in order to make that happen. And that's because some people, hey, they're out of a job, in a job, or they're in a job, they want something else, not happy. They want to transition, to a different sector. They want to pivot. Hey, they want to stay in their own company and get promoted. And all those require slightly different strategies. So I always start out with somebody is, okay, can you define where you're at now? Most people can do that immediately. Okay. And then where is it you want to go? And define that. And so with those definitions, then we worked on the bridge they need in order to accomplish that. And they might say they want to do two things. So we take that into account in the bridge building. And
Do you,
then they got a lot of work to do. It's like it's like a structured writing of a term paper on yourself.
it's hard.
It's it's hard, and that's why you need a little structure. You need a little focus, and it's not my first rodeo.
Yeah, you've helped 689 people.
Right. And people say, "Well, Joe, why do you tell me that?" And I say, "Well, if you work with me, the first thing I'm going to tell you is if you can't measure your production, then save your money.
Hmm.
Because if you can't say what you produce, then no one you can't sell yourself. You can't if you can't say why your deal's a good deal, nobody's coming in there.
It's so true, man. There's so many times where, metrics matter. People,
Metrics matter, qualitative, but quantitative are the best that you can have.
yeah, nah, so true. Because it produces trust and credibility.
Right. So, like, I was just working with a CFO. He's out of a job. They sold the company. This was yesterday,
Hmm.
and he said, "Joe, I need some help." And I said, "Well, let's work on that." And so, and he did all these things to sell the company, and I said, "Let's get those stories in there with the metrics."
Yeah.
You know, and I said, "Okay, if they're confidential, let's combine two of your positions and say in the last 7 years."
Hmm.
I've worked in two companies. We've done these four financial transactions valued at such and such with teams of such and such, that accomplished, on time and on target,
Yeah.
um, and get that out there because when I, as an executive recruiter, when I'm looking for somebody, I'm looking for somebody that can solve the client's problem. And the best way to find that is somebody that says they solved that problem
For
with for
someone else.
somebody else.
Totally.
So it's all about telling your story very succinctly with metrics on LinkedIn, story after story after story after story after story.
Because people want to know, I have an issue. Can you solve it for me?
Right.
So,
So when I get a position spec, it's 3 pages long, 2 pages long, but there's 4 items on there that there's actually blood and tear stains on there, and I highlight those. And so when I'm doing that search, I'm looking for, okay, who has solved this problem? Because why? Because it's an easy sell to the client.
hmm,
Hey, this guy has solved the exact thing problem you're having, and you ought to at least call him in and spend an hour and run him through the hoops.
yeah.
And I've been extremely successful with that.
Do you still do recruiting or just
I don't
coaching and
I don't chase it. I just finished a CEO search and facilitation. I call it facilitation because it's whatever it takes to get the person,
yeah.
you know, So it's a lot more than a search. It's, accommodating, there's two sides to every deal, right? So you got to make sure all parties are um, good to go in that. So I just finished one in August for a medical services company. I just don't chase the work anymore. Um, Clients that have used me before and that kind of stuff, then, you don't have to go through that whole wrangling of, hey, got to do it this way. It's going to be this percentage, and I'm done with that.
Yeah. Yeah. You're more like a scalpel. You're precision.
If you want the purple unicorn, I've been able to find at least a dark blue one.
Yep. Yeah. So, in behind you, now that your office is home, if house caught on fire or flooded again or something like that, and everybody got out safe, all heartbeats are out, dogs, pets, whatever, family, but you could only grab one material possession out of your office, what would you grab?
Laptop.
Yeah, yeah, I got it. None of those
Okay. And the
plaques.
reason I say I grabbed that is because I've got my business where, I've coached in, I think, 14 different countries now.
Wow.
And I've coached from the Bahamas, Las Vegas, wherever my wife likes to be. The only requirement that I have is got to have Wi-Fi and phone service.
Yep. Yeah. So when it comes to deals, you've seen a lot of deals, and you've helped a lot of people with transitions on their LinkedIn and such. So you did mention a book. What was the name of that book one more time?
It's called LinkedIn,
Hmm.
the 5 minute drill for executive networking success.
Give us maybe a point or two out of the book, so deal makers listening in, they go, I could apply that immediately and get some type of better result.
Well, the most frequent thing I got from executives was, "Hey, I don't want to be on this LinkedIn stuff, but I, I kind of got to be there, and so I don't want to spend any time on it." So, Lori and I worked up, the 5 minute drill, which is a checklist, so that an executive, if they follow it absolutely to the T, can be done, in 5 minutes. And they kind of get on LinkedIn, they do some housekeeping of their own. They like a few things that, came their way in one of their groups or what have you, and they're in and out, but they've left a footprint in the LinkedIn sands of time. And and I said, okay, if you want to do it more than that, do 5 minutes at the end of the day. But what they wanted was a structured way to not, like, use it like I do, kind of day in and day out, and just say, okay, been there, I've raised the flag, and I'm there. And I've had a couple people call up and say, look, you just sold me some BS on this 5 minute thing. And I said, no. I said, are you taking the checklist and are you executing it? And I said, look, you got to do it for 2 weeks. And I said, don't go off anywhere outside the checklist. I mean, Facebook and LinkedIn, all those social media is that way. This kind of interesting over here. I
Yeah.
said, nope, can't do that. Nope, nope, that's your time. The 5 minute drill is so that you do this. And one guy said, look, after I did this 14 days, Joe, I have to call you and apologize. And I'm offering you a dinner because I was wrong. You can do it in 5 minutes, but you're right. You got to stick to the plan. I
Yeah.
said, right. I mean, there's nothing to say that you can't spend 15 minutes if you want to. But what most people wanted, hey, I want to get in, get out, say I was there, leave my scent
Yeah.
and move on. And then the second half of the book just has what I call suggestions for what you need to do with your profile. And then there's lots of other resources in the back, other sources, as well as, some PDF links to some sheets, to checklists, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So if someone's like, "Hey, listen, I know that I got to do some stuff, but I'd rather you just do it for me or do it with me," do you guys offer those kind of services where people could call you up and have you walk them through that process?
Yeah. So what I do, I do that, and that's usually a 2 to 3 hour process on the front end. First hour is take take your head and turn it inside out. Second hour is okay. Here's the mechanics of LinkedIn, and this is what you need to do based on what we discussed was your mission. Then you got to. Then I'll give them, hey, here's 3 things that you can sprint on. I mean, you can do this in an hour. Okay. The rest of it is a marathon. And you need to sit down. Here's the structure, go build the content, you know, and then I help them with that. In other words, when they're building their content, hey, Joe, you were talking about this the other day. I'm confused. I get on the phone and work with them. And so I see them through the from start to finish. It's the old adage, you got to do it.
Hmm.
Yes.
So for deal makers out there who want some help doing it, they're going to take a look at your book and connect with you. What's a good place for them to find you, connect with you, and do a deal with you?
The best place is LinkedIn. I get 500 emails a day, and I swear I spend most of my time, on the delete button.
Yeah.
So LinkedIn is the best way. I'm an open connector. In other words, you can send me a LinkedIn message without having being connected to me. So I'm open from that standpoint.
Super cool. Are there any questions during this interview that I should have asked you that I screwed up and did not ask you, Joe?
I think the thing that I would say is with LinkedIn, um, you know, there's what I call the covert overt nexus. Okay. So overt means like Josh does his part. Okay. He decides that he wants to look for a new opportunity or a new deal, call it what you may. So the overt part is where he's out there, clicking on Google, looking in LinkedIn, doing whatever he's going to do to find what he wants. That's overt. What most people miss out is the covert part. And the covert part is, hey, build a world class LinkedIn profile that fully describes everything you bring to the table. And I'm talking about everything you bring to the table since, high school forward. you
Hmm.
know uh, I mean, I get a lot of questions. I know that I can sell a guy easier if I can tell the person that he worked in high school and that he had some sort of fiscal responsibility. Okay. I just found that's an easier sell. A lot of people um, say they were an Eagle Scout and they don't put that on their LinkedIn profile. I get requirements to, hey, Joe, they won't ever put it in writing, but they, Joe, I was an Eagle Scout. So what's the guy telling me?
Look for
I'm
an
going
Eagle
to
Scout.
bring in the Girl Scout equivalent or the Boy Scout equivalent,
Yeah.
to that. You know, I'm not stupid,
Yeah.
you know. Uh,
Well, I think this is such an important thing when it comes to strategic networking and doing deals and building a deal ecosystem and building relationships with people is this tends to happen, not always. Birds of a feather flock together, right? It's this I have a natural affinity towards people who have a similar story or background. Like our similarities tend to bring us together and that we can look at things. So the more you share, the more you're open with your experiences, success, and failures, it attracts people who are similar minded belief systems, experience systems. Am I on the right page here?
Yeah, for example, one of my volunteer activities is, I give blood, right? And so every time I give blood, I put, a 1 sentence entry in there because during COVID, they called me up a lot. But so one day I had the CEO contact me and I said, oh, well, how did you, I'm like you, how did you find me? and he said, Joe, you're a blood donor. And the only place that is on my LinkedIn profile. It's not on Google. So he searched for blood donor. I said, well, why does that interest you? He said, well, I have a child that requires frequent blood donations. And if I'm going to do business with somebody, I'm going to try to do business for somebody that supports my child.
Yeah, so good, man. I think, and this is maybe, maybe it was a part of my father's generation that I got trained in. I didn't want to overshare. I didn't want to share content or share my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts. And what I'm realizing is, and we have another few podcast shows, and one of them we talk really openly. And I find the more authentic and transparent I can be, I attract more people like me who I like. Right?
Isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
I've had people call me up and say, Joe, hey, I see you're doing this, and I think might want to do that. I said, man, how'd you find me? I said, hey, you were an offensive center in high school football.
Yeah.
I was too.
Super cool. Yeah. Awesome, man. So, Joe, really enjoyed our conversation. Once again, man, love your history, love your story, love what you're doing. For people out there who want to connect with you, do a deal, and get some help, what's one place that they could go to do that?
LinkedIn, Joe Frankie the third.
Joe Frankie the third. You heard it, guys. And I'll put his LinkedIn linked in the LinkedIn link in the show notes. So if you guys are listening and want to connect with him, as always, the mission and purpose of the show is to connect deals and deal makers and to find new things about deals and things that we might not be aware of, but it's to raise the deal making community and to build a really strong ecosystem. So if you have a deal that you're working on and you want to talk about it, come talk about it here on the Deal Scout. And it might be a good fit for someone out there in the audience. So that's thedealscout.com. Fill out a quick form and maybe get you on the show next. Till then, we'll talk to you all on the next episode. Bye, guys.